Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 50th audio file in the audiocast series known as the Q News Patriot. I'm the Q News Patriot. My name is SGAnon. I couldn't be coming to you today more excited, enthused, and elated. It's just really not possible. What we have going on, what we're witnessing around the world right now, the chaos that is beginning to break loose in the public space, the dishevelment that we're starting to see from all of the different warring factions throughout the world in this massive and epic power struggle for control of the Earth's destiny, it's really fully on display at this point. Today's file is going to have a large amount of information. I'm going to try and condense it and make it fluid as best as I can. I've been spending really the last 72 hours, most of the research that I've been doing outside of posting on TruthSocial has been in preparation for this file. There are incredible things happening in all different theaters around the world, including communications, both blatant and covert, from the commander-in-chief, Donald J. Trump, activity from the Russian military, activity in the Middle East with Turkey, especially in the run-up to their elections in 5 days, which the U.S.-based terrorist organization CIA, actually Switzerland-based, but reinforced by the U.S., and then of course the Mossad. They really can't stand this. Turkey and the Arab coalition that are forming right now with the backing of Russia, with the backing of China, and soon to be with the backing of the African continent and a group of African nations, that's really going to spell the end by the time we get to the end of this movie for that Canaanite locus of control in the Middle East. Just recently, we had evidence of the United States Coast Guard operating in territorial waters halfway around the world, ostensibly, of course, under the Department of the Navy. Big shout out again to Mr. Derek Johnson and others for highlighting how the United States laws of war, how the overall schematic ties together and really helps paint the picture for what World War III optically versus what World War III covertly is really all about. So without too much further ado, we're going to go ahead and get right to it. We're going to start with Russia. We're going to tie that in here in just a moment to some commander-in-chief communications comms from Trump, simply because these are really dovetailing, and what's going to be on full display very soon is actually going to also involve Elon Musk. It's going to involve Twitter. It's going to involve the information apparatus just sort of as a whole. So let's get right to it. As many of us are aware, Russia has begun a campaign, a new phase of their campaign within the Ukrainian countryside, sort of kicking off with the feigned drone attack by the Ukrainian army on the Kremlin. It's worth highlighting to everyone out there that there are really only two possibilities with that attack, and that the Ukrainian capability to launch such an offensive is simply not possible. It's not there. The Ukrainian military has their hands absolutely full. They can't even get conscripts from the countryside to the point where they're kidnapping anybody that's able-bodied and sending them off to service with very little, if any, training. They've really been sort of attritioned out at this point. So it's worth highlighting that that particular event that occurred in Moscow, it looked pathetic just from the video footage, but the CIA, the Mossad, the Five Eyes communities, British MI6 being heavily involved in that as well, I believe are primarily to blame for that. But it's also possible that this was a false flag staged by the Patriots of the Russian military as a justification for expanding the operations within Ukraine, expanding the operations as it pertains to the reinforcement of the borders with NATO countries, and of course the movement of assets, military capabilities, etc., throughout Western Russia. Regardless of what the premise is, we've seen the results. Just a couple of days ago, Russia began a very intense air and missile campaign launched from 3 separate sectors, including strategic air platforms that were in the air over the Ukrainian countryside and along the Baltic states' borders, which sort of paints us the picture that we've already known for a while, that the Russian Air Force, in conjunction with their allies, really do command and control the skies in those areas. And air power is a very important portion of what is going on in the world. The ability to secure ourselves at the airborne level, the ability to launch munitions air to ground, the ability to insulate very important individuals, including President Putin, including President Trump, and others, Prime Minister Orban, for example, is very critical as we go through this process, because it provides an element, sort of a wild card, that the deep state's not able to handle, we have a multi-front, a multi-angular conflict occurring, right? We have white hat mill versus black hat mill within the NATO nations that is beginning to really pop off and kick off. We know that the white hat militaries are yoked with one another through the back channels of military intelligence. We have good visual evidence over the last 5 years to corroborate this. So it's worth highlighting that insulating these particular factions and providing a multi-front war, not only a multi-front, but a multi-dimensional air, ground, sea, underground, all of the necessary components, is really a massive portion of how we assault this apparatus all around the world. We've talked a lot on this program about how we assault things at the multi-level plane, if you will, throughout society, between business, finance, banking, law, economics, bureaucracy, military power, and even within that military power, we have the industrial complex, the murder complex, the mercenary warlords, and the Patriots. It's worth highlighting that that is becoming a massive component publicly, even at this point, as we witness operations in the Pacific, as we witness operations in Eastern Europe that are expanding soon to Central and Northern Europe, and operations in the Western Hemisphere. So it's worth noting that Russia is preparing the groundwork right now. They have actually moved more than 1 million soldiers. The Russian regular army has moved more than 1 million soldiers down into the southwest of the country and into the Ukrainian captured, I shouldn't say captured territories, I should say reincorporated territories, in preparation for what's going to be a full-scale ground offensive. That ground offensive will go at least all of the way to the Polish border, possibly into the Polish border by the time this is all over. Additionally, President Lukashenko was in Moscow just a couple of days ago, ostensibly to discuss interoperational coordination with the Russian military as he met with the Russian Minister of Defense. We've been talking a little bit on this program how Belarus and their military capabilities have been bolstered, streamlined, sort of coordinated with Russia. They've been really working on interoperational effectiveness for a long time. And Belarus and Russian President Putin have already discussed initial framework, if you will, for the reincorporation of the Belarusian territory into Mother Russia. Now, what's between Belarus and Russia? Well, it's the NATO nations, the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Also, traditionally, if we go ancestrally back several hundred years, they're a portion of Russia. They were liberated away from Russia against the will of the Russian people, and of course, stolen away as a result of having their country sort of partitioned and piecemealed by the same sort of deep state apparatus that took hold under Bolshevism, that had a decent little foothold at different points along the way in the last 400 years, but really solidified under Bolshevism in 1917. And of course, the ruling class, the ancestral inheritance, the inheritance of we the people, being forced out of Russia with the destruction of the Romanov dynasty. So these are amazing events that are kicking off in preparation for what we can only sort of describe as going to be a multi-front kinetic public war as it pertains to really Russia versus NATO. The Baltic states will fall in this particular upcoming conflict, and that is a major portion of why Russia has been sort of draining NATO of their military reserves, draining NATO of their capability. At the same time that this has been occurring with Russia, over these last year and a half or so, we have a situation occurring in the West where, because of the nature of the financial systems, because of the destruction that's being caused within the banking systems, the financial levers of power, the NATO nations are simply not able to industrialize and keep up and mobilize in the way that they have always been before. In other words, the Russian economy and the Russian industrial war machine, in partnership with their allies, China, Iran, Turkey, and others, is really outpacing the ability of the West to keep up with war, not only in a kinetic military sense, not only in an equipment sense, but also in the ability to make up for lost ground. So the NATO nations are, sort of being drained out. They're sort of being drug into the limelight without the ability to effectively oppose things. And that's a component of this operation that constitutes yet another front in this war, just like we were talking about a moment ago. If you don't have the financial market capability, if you don't have the liquid lifeblood to build the war machine, to convert production and industry and produce the weapons, produce the ability to wage war, produce the ability to embattle with one another, then naturally the one who's capable of doing that will win. I think that's a major reason, if I can, just my own personal opinion, that we've seen the military operation within the United States government and the continuity of government that has been put into place. It's a major component of why that became what it did and why it's gone the way that it has. We've seen the Speaker McCarthy. We've seen the fake Joe Biden many times just in the last few weeks discussing this idea of a debt ceiling, all of the money that's gone to Ukraine, which of course we know didn't actually go to Ukraine, all of the weapons that have gone to Ukraine, most of which have been really destroyed and intercepted by the Russians, to the point where Zelensky just a few days ago was making yet another video asking for help, yet another video asking for weapons. We need more of this. We need more of that. And the NATO nations, still remaining under black hat control, are aware that if they continue to supply arms to really what is becoming a burning bonfire of military equipment in Eastern Europe, they're going to be left defenseless in their own right. It's worth highlighting that certain territories, such as in the east of Finland, the Baltic states, Belarus, I think we could even go so far as to say portions of Poland, but I'm unclear on that in particular. But certainly in these other areas, these are Russian territories by ancestry and heritage, and they must be returned. That's part of writing the spell work, writing the karmic justice, giving meaning to the generational suffering, the billions of lives that have been lost in wars over the years. And it's important to return that, all of that, to the rightful owners. The same principle applies with Taiwan and China. Taiwan always has been a Chinese territory, has always been ancestrally Chinese, has always been very proud, really, to have been associated and a part of, the dynasties of China, the Empire of China, if we want to call it that. And so that is something that the ancestors for the Chinese people would very much want to see happen. And the Chinese and the Asian societies really in general take this concept of honor, this concept of restoration, of integrity, doing right by their ancestors, doing right by their history as a very, very serious component in how they operate day to day and how they behave with one another. So it's worth highlighting that that is a major reason, just as in with Europe, why we're seeing the things occurring in the Pacific. Additionally, outside of these particular rightings of wrongs, we have kinetic operations that have to happen, right? We know that the Russians have been liberating DUMBs. We know that the Russians have been destroying and cataloging bioweapon laboratories. We know that there have been literally tens of thousands of children and hostages rescued by the Russian army, and they haven't even gone fully into Ukraine. We're about halfway through the process, right? If we look at the situation and define the actual front lines and the borders, the Russian army, the Russian paramilitary PMC Wagner, with the backing of the Russian army, has only taken about 40% of the territory that really ancestrally must be returned. So what are we going to find in that other 60% as we move further west? I think we're going to find a lot of the same. Kiev, of course, being a central location, if you will, for all of the pharmaceutical, not all, but a lot of the pharmaceutical research and development, a lot of the bioweapon genomic research, a lot of the really, really awful things that the deep state had been planning for the rest of the world will come out of Kiev, will come out of the western portions of Ukraine. And that's one of the reasons we've seen a schism begin to develop in the white hats versus black hats within the NATO militaries. Everyone's sort of looking to protect their own side. Everyone's trying to keep their own flag from being captured. One of the reasons I believe that it's possible we see the Russian army even into Poland before this is all over is because that corridor from southeastern Poland into western Ukraine across those areas of Europe has been a major component of trafficking of bioweapons and especially the research and personnel involved in that out of Ukraine, getting them further west of the Russians, knowing that the Russian army and the bear are coming. So it's worth highlighting that Xi has the same goal, right? We have to eliminate all of these different evils. We have to right the ancestral wrongs, but we also have to destroy and catalog all of the weapon laboratories, all of the biological pathogens that have been created and weaponized. We have to be able to get a bead on who did what. We have to have the documentation to prove it in tribunals. We have to rescue the children, especially beneath Taiwan and into the Philippines. The Philippines will be involved in this primarily because they're an avenue and have been for several hundred years for intense child trafficking, organ harvesting, adrenochrome. Some of the worst crimes imaginable have gone on in and within within and surrounding the Philippine areas. And it's been an area of the world that has really not had a lot of oversight as it pertains to ensuring that these sorts of things didn't occur, right? So, and this goes all of the way back to the Spanish conquest of the Philippines back, I believe it was in the 17th century, moving right along and right forward. We can go forward into the 20th century with MacArthur, who, unfortunately, and I respect the military history just as all of you do, but unfortunately, General MacArthur, not one of the individuals that we would like to think would have been on our side, would have been for we the people everywhere. Certainly sort of a sexual deviant, if we will, and there's evidence to show this. And so we're righting a lot of these wrongs. We're involving exposure here in a lot of these areas. The Philippines being a primary hub for a lot of the deep state islands, similar to the Epstein Islands in the Caribbean, that exist within the Pacific Rim and the Pacific regions. That's one of, and if not the major reason, that in the biolaboratories in Taiwan, that we're seeing black hats within Japan, the Australia, New Zealand area, even out of Indonesia and South Korea coming into play, rattling their sabers, getting themselves ready because they understand that China and the CCP are sort of two different factions, and the Chinese Patriots now have control of most of that military apparatus with that coup that was attempted last year. That was the justification for Chinese patriots to insulate the lawful president and to absolutely crush dissension within the flag officer ranks of the military and to reclaim control of the Chinese military intelligence community. As a result of that, we've seen things come around in the United States and other areas wanting to ban TikTok. Why? Because TikTok was overtaken within that coup. The net results of that becoming, of course, this massive red pill machine, as opposed to just a data collection machine, which is what TikTok has been for a very, very long time. So all of these situations sort of tie together and dovetail very nicely. And the Chinese are also well aware of what's going on in the Middle East and are prepared to lend their support in that direction as well. We have some reports online, especially on the deep web, of Chinese military assets showing up in Afghanistan, showing up in Iran, showing up in Turkey. We already know that there have been Chinese assets deployed for several months now in Russia and Southwest Russia. They've actually transited across the continent and have been moved into that area. And just recently, China issued a statement. I believe it was one of their ministers came out and said essentially that glory was to Russia for resisting the satanic, really the cabal, right? The glory lies with them for doing the right thing and for pressing forward in the face of such worldwide opposition, even though a lot of that opposition, as we all know, is really sort of created and cast as a picture of the overall theme rather than being the actual truth. In addition to all of this, we have good evidence now. I found a couple of things on Twitter as well as a couple of different articles on the deep web to show that Russian special forces have actually been going around the world in the last several weeks and have shown up recently in Haiti. And this is where we're going to tie in our file today to a little bit of the Trump comms that we have, because it's very fascinating to see the Russians involved in the Caribbean area, and Haiti, of course, being the locus, if you will, of some of the most incredible criminality ever committed at the behest of both the Clinton Foundation and the Red Cross under the guise of natural disasters. The Haitian earthquake not being an organic event, that was an instigated event through highly advanced technology. It gave the justification to go down into that country and set up what amounted to one of the world's largest child trafficking and kidnapping bazaars that has ever graced the earth. So understanding then that the Russians are heavily involved in righting that wrong, exposing the Clinton Foundation, we tie that back to Uranium One. We see these webs sort of coalesce and come together. And it's fascinating to see the Trump comms that we had regarding this very issue, which we'll get into in just a moment, that tied directly to a lot of that. So let's go over here. We're going to go to the President's Truth Social. On May the 5th, 2023 at 10:14 a.m., Title 42 expires next week, all capitalized. So this is a border, right? This is a border reference. He's obviously drawing attention to the invasion of the United States. But how else does this play out? Well, the truth reads, this date will go down in infamy, 3 exclamation points. Our borders will completely collapse. We will be officially a third world nation. So I came over here to our Q drops, and I thought to myself, well, let's just go ahead and start with the simplest of terms. I decoded this several different ways. Each way came back to something that was common themed, especially as it pertains to what I was just discussing with the Russian military and special operations. I put in the word infamy into the Q post, and one Q post, only one, contains the word infamy. It's post 392 from December the 19th of 2017 at 8:50 and 59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We go down here. It's a number of different posts by Anons, names, digging, links, little black books, etc. Then we arrive at this post, Heidi Fleiss, regarding Heidi Fleiss. Her cadre of high-class hookers once commanded $1,500 a night from high-rolling celebrities at the height of her infamy. There's the word. Fleiss was known as the Hollywood Madam and was busted at her home in June '93 by the Los Angeles Police Department. Her father, Dr. Paul Fleiss, a prominent LA pediatrician, oversaw the birth of Madonna's firstborn child. Now, we know Madonna, of course, is a satanic child trafficking witch and adrenochrome user, a very evil person. Although apparently not Catholic, she attended a Catholic high school for which she later tried to raise money by auctioning off a night with her and then boyfriend Tom Sizemore. The school was forced to cancel due to publicity. She did serve time from January '97 to November of '98 in Dublin, California, USA, on charges of tax evasion. So sort of a slap on the wrist, sort of a reminder to keep in line, right? This is how these individuals work. They slap you a little bit, you spend a little bit of time in jail, then they come out and they've got you by the short hairs, if you will. She's the second cousin of Michael Fleiss, launched a line of clothing called Heidi Wear. Excuse me, her Los Angeles boutique, The Little Shop of Sex, scheduled to open in 2005. She also had a legal brothel in Nevada, likely Las Vegas. I haven't investigated that. Author of several titillating books, including Pandering and The Player's Handbook, and a DVD entitled Sex Tips with Victoria Sellers. She dropped out of high school in 10th grade. When she was 22, she met Madame Alex, a well-known Los Angeles brothel owner. Fleiss soon took over the business. Fleiss brought her young friends to work for her, and the business grew from $50,000 a month to more than $300,000 per month. She played matchmaker to the richest men in the world, carefully pairing them with women tailored to fantasies, making all their financial and travel arrangements, and of course kept 40% for herself. It's worth highlighting that she attended the same high school as Bo Barrett, Leonardo DiCaprio, Anne Marie Johnson, and Julie Newmar. So we go through here. We have another image of Chuck Schumer being connected to this. Hollywood Madam, CIA asset, occult practitioner, all of this sort of tying back together. And then we get to the base of this Q, the base of this Q post, and a graphic with missing children. Q, where are the children? Where are they? Love, Tlin, OKC. So that's someone from Oklahoma City, I would assume. Q responds, 3,000 plus saved by the raids in Saudi Arabia alone. Worldwide lanes shut down, bottom to top. Haiti, Red Cross, classified, high priority. So this comes back to the occult trafficking, the adrenochrome, and how these dark infrastructures and apparatuses are able to function together with themselves, how their control is maintained, how their logistics are maintained, how their movement is insulated, how they control one another. And it's very important. I think this is the major reason, of course, that all of the darkness, all of the evil, all of the corruption, both in the United States government and around the world, is sort of able to be tied together. There's this massive unifying factor as it pertains to saving the children. And that's really what's going on. So I came back to Trump's truth, and I wasn't fully convinced that I had a successful decode. So I put in third world. I went ahead and used 3RD as opposed to THIRD. What I came up with was absolutely amazing. It was post 29. Only 2 posts contain this phrase. Excuse me, only 1 post contains this phrase. I apologize. Post 29, November the 1st of 2017, merely 3 days after Q actually came on the scene. Some things must remain classified to the very end. North Korea is not being run by Kim. He's an actor in the play. Who is the director? The truth would sound so outrageous, most Americans would riot and revolt. The pedo networks are being dismantled. The child abduction for satanic rituals, Haiti and other third world countries are paused but not terminated until players in custody. We pray every single day for God's guidance and direction because we are truly up against pure evil. So at this point, I'm becoming very, very convinced with what's going on in the world as we can observably demonstrate with the Russian special operations, and then this truth from Trump on May the 5th, that we're moving into the phase where the Clinton Foundation, the Haitian crime, the criminality that has been perpetrated against those people and against children here in the Western Hemisphere throughout the Caribbean Basin, that's coming to a head. We're going to get into that more in just a second as it pertains to Elon. But I came over here. I was fascinated by the timestamp as well, 1014, right? So I came over here and I thought to myself, well, is there anything interesting with timestamp 1014? And certainly enough, there is. We've got a drop here. Let me see here. Drop 1195. It's actually a three-part drop. It's a Q&A that initially begins with Q saying Q&A 5 minutes at 1013, and Anon puts up at 1014, when will we find out about Seth Rich in Las Vegas? And Q responds, Seth Rich connects to the DNC. MS-13, Julian Assange. Why did the Dems push legal rep on family? June ETA. So here we are in May of 2023. So we've just over a 5-year period of time from this drop. We've got massive exposure coming to the forefront about the child trafficking rings with the congressional testimony just in the last few weeks, before the House committees, before the congressional committees in the United States, discussing Joe Biden, discussing the United States government in complicity with this child trafficking, actually orchestrating these child trafficking rings and allowing them into the country. That exposure is really gaining traction and steam. We also know that Julian Assange was primarily targeted by all governments that were corrupted around the world, all at one time, really, sort of in unison, because of the information that he had been able to garner and then hold on to, discussing this very issue, discussing the child trafficking, discussing the adrenochrome rings, discussing the pedophilia, the Obama $60,000 pizza party, Comet Ping Pong, all of these other, fronts and facets and angles that tie back to this same evil. Julian Assange had it all. And that's one of the reasons he's been and really has been for a while the most wanted man in the world by this particular deep state. And it's why it's been so important to insulate Julian this entire time. So these compelling drops to me point me towards the idea that we have operations going on to eliminate these operations, these trafficking and really disgusting criminal operations in the Caribbean Basin. And then I came over here and I thought to myself, well, let's go ahead and see if anything ties back in this fashion to May the 5th, because this was put out on 5x5. If we want to take it a little bit further, this truth from the president came out May 5th of 23, so 5x5x5. And I came up with drop 4108 seems to tie back in a fashion to this as it pertains to the symbolism. 4108, May the 5th. And actually, this drop includes a 1717 timestamp as well, which I think is absolutely fascinating. An image of the Red Cross with a bow on top. It doesn't get more obvious to me when we combine all of these different facets, all of these different component parts, that we've got a massive, massive point towards the Clinton Foundation, Haiti, the Red Cross, how these operations work, how these trafficking and kidnapping operations around the world have always been done, and how it's always done under the guise of humanitarian aid when it's sort of on its face, right? That's how this cabal, this Luciferian inversion society has always been. They paint it as something that's good and right, but it's really those very organizations, those very areas that we're taught to trust so much and put faith into and donate to and donate towards, right, and give blood for, and all of this. It's all of those entities that partake in just absolute evil. And it's what it is. It's absolute evil. So that being said, I think that we can be pretty confident that the exposure to this and the extent of the exposure, I think, for this is coming to the forefront in a very big way. I personally believe, based on my research, that that is going to happen through Twitter and Elon Musk. We already have Elon Musk discussing things online about how the media misrepresents things, about how the U.S. government is involved in criminal activity. We have Elon highlighting financial criminality. We have Elon exposing government censorship. We have the Twitter files, which has been an unbelievably successful counterintelligence operation to break open the idea that government and private entities are separate when they are in fact not, especially as it pertains to big tech, and big tech being involved with artificial intelligence, algorithmic, programming, and things of that nature. So it would make sense to me, and it does make sense to me, that the Twitter platform and other big tech platforms like YouTube, like TikTok, like Apple and the Alphabet organization, right, like Facebook, they're going to be involved and shown for what they really are, and it's going to occur through their own conduits, through their own channels. We've talked a little bit on this program about how, whether it's Elon 1.0 or Elon 2.0 or whatever, this is an individual that is playing a part. This is an individual that is being contacted at different points along the way, maybe not directly in the sense that we would like to think, but certainly indirectly, being positioned to bring forth an absolute massive amount of declass, a massive amount of disclosure, bypassing the mainstream, bypassing these information channels and outlets that are still controlled by foreign adversaries that we still have not been able to get fully under control, with the exception of certain broadcasting rights in the United States because of the military operation that occurred and really began post November 3rd of 2020. That military operation exists for a number of different reasons, right? We all know that. But one of the component portions of that, one of the objectives of that operation is to hang the mainstream media on their own rope. We have to show the world, we have to show the average ordinary person that there is no such thing as freedom without information control. There is no, or excuse me, without information free flow. There is no such thing as freedom when we cannot discern things correctly because things are being hidden from us on purpose. There is no such thing as self-determination when we do not have a clear picture. So a major component of what we're doing with this entire operation is not only to highlight the criminality, not only to expose the pedophilia, the trafficking, the adrenochrome, the child sacrifice, the murder, the Epstein Island Room 29, the HRC, February 12th, 2009, right? We're not only doing that, but we're also doing it in such a way that the typical avenues, the typical modalities of information receptivity are completely destroyed. Their reputations will never again be, buildable and reliable. They won't be able to be reconstructed. We will have to do away entirely and build anew. We will have to foot new channels of how we discuss things. We are the news now, Q tells us. As a matter of fact, there's a Q drop that says you are the news, handle with care. So this is a very important component of this entire operation that we're dealing with. And the next phase of exposure, in my own personal opinion here, as I've done these decodes and research, is going to be the pedophilia, the child trafficking, and the dark, dark evil that is contained within that entire framework. So that being said, we're going to move right along to our next topic here, which is going to be the Mossad IDF I shouldn't say invasion, I should say thrashing about within the Middle East, and that's coming. We have the Canaanite locus of control within the Middle East, understanding very clearly now that they're not going to win this battle. We have Mossad capabilities, especially sky-based capabilities such as satellite weaponry, DEWs, etc., that have been getting assaulted for a while now, not fully under control at this point, but certainly under control to a great degree. And we're seeing rattling within that area of the world already. We're seeing the involvement of the IDF in Gaza. We've seen rocket attacks and small-scale Israeli incursions up through Lebanon. Those are going to continue into Syria because of Assad, not Mossad, Assad, Bashar Assad. This is an individual who is a Syrian for Syria, right? This is an individual who is aligned with Putin, who is aligned with this worldwide alliance, who wants to see this absolute evil that has taken entrenchment in what was really supposed to be the promised land of old. He wants to see that dethroned and destroyed. The Mossad is very well aware of that, and they're very well aware of this, the historical significance of what all is contained within Syria. Syria holds a lot of the world's history. Damascus is one of the oldest cities in the world. Aleppo is also one of the oldest cities in the world. So there's a lot of the correct history. There's a lot of the right record that still exists in that area. And so if you are an enemy and you are looking at a potential defeat, how do you ensure, and especially in an information battle as well as a kinetic battle, how do you ensure that you are you come out on the other side victorious? Well, you have to have public opinion. You would like to, ideally, you would like to have military power and dominance and victory. But even if you don't have that, how can you insulate yourself going forward? Well, you have to have the public opinion. In order to have the public opinion, you have to have control of the record. You have to be able to write, alter, or affect in some fashion the history, which is going to influence opinions going forward. So that is a major goal of the Khazarian protectorate, if you will, down there, is to preserve their own lens of how they have put together history and prevent the rest of the world from learning true things. You know, things like the kings of old, the Assyrian kings of old, going all of the way back to Nineveh, and how those dynamics in those days played out. You know, going back really to the Great Flood even, and how the post-flood world played out and allowed for the encroachment all around the world of this satanic Luciferian cabal, this Canaanite religion that has affected every single one of us across all of our national boundaries, unknowingly, of course, but absolutely has affected us for hundreds and hundreds, really thousands of years at this point. So as Turkey continues to strengthen itself, as Turkey continues to wipe out CIA assets, including just recently killing a CIA commander in the north of Syria, we're seeing that sort of saber rattling from the Israeli state beginning to become a kinetic thing. We've got the Arab coalition that is going to help dethrone that from the south and west and east beginning to come together. We have Egypt and Saudi Arabia discussing military cooperation. We have Egypt, several North African nations, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and others applying to be part of the BRICS alliance. Part of that cooperation will be not only the financial and trade, not only the economic benefits, but also military cooperation. We have China spearheading negotiations between several Arab nations, trying to get them all to the table. Post-Abraham Accords, right? The Abraham Accords from President Trump being the first major olive branch, the first major step in the formation of what's going to become an Arab League, really, an Arab coalition against these Canaanites. And bringing them together under common auspices, common respect, common deference, giving them the appropriate recognition that they have really craved from an American president for a very long time. Now we have China coming in with their economic and military power. Of course, the western portions of China extending all of the way really into the Middle East, the eastern areas of the Middle East. They're sort of broaching these other discussions, helping iron out some of these other important details, providing military aid where it's necessary, offering to provide capital where it's necessary. We have the yuan being traded and really becoming a massive economic force within the BRICS nations. And that's, of course, that economic backing, that guarantee of money is a big portion of what's going on here. Saudi Arabia also in ties with China, discussions with China to help increase the influence of those currencies within that alliance bloc so that they can come against that final Canaanite resistance in the Middle East. Based on the research that I'm doing, it's looking like we're going to have an Israeli invasion to the north, going through Lebanon, going into Syria in an attempt to escape, in an attempt to get back to their very ancient areas that they've always used to get away, from different coalitions and military advances, military prowess in ages past, not only going back even to 1967 and 1948, but much, much further. You know, we're talking several hundred and even several thousand years in some situations. Egypt is going to be involved in this militarily before it's over. I think we're obviously going to see Turkey involved in this, and Russia and China before it's over. It's very possible that we even see some of the southeastern nations in Europe involved in two different directions, down from the Istanbul, Constantinople areas of old, and certainly up into the Eastern European areas with Ukraine, Belarus, Hungary, going back several hundred years. So this is a massive time to be alive. This is really an amazing time that we're all living through and that we're getting a chance to watch, we're getting a chance to witness, and we're being allowed the opportunity to put together all of these component portions and pieces in a largesse discussion to really appreciate the full picture. We've got the coronation just recently of the fake King Charles. You know, what a symbolic event to witness, right? 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days after the death, or excuse me, the funeral of QE2, one of the most evil women ever to exist. We have Charles crowned, and he doesn't even look happy. And as a matter of fact, he doesn't even look human really at that point. We got blinking sideways on two separate eyes. At the same time that this occurs, the crown goes down. On to Charles, and Camilla gets to go up there and live the dream that she's always wanted. They look absolutely miserable. And then the Grim Reaper of all people walks by the door of the Abbey in a very quick, a very quick step-like fashion across the front door, just enough to get people's attention, not enough to draw more conclusions from it. If we understand what that means, the Grim Reaper is sort of a legend from old, going back to the Greek god Kronos, who allegedly took up residence in the Scottish Isles, of all places, to be honest. I believe it was Edsel Castle. And that particular castle is 51 kilometers, I think, from the Trump golf course that the president was just recently involved with and at. The symbolism here is absolutely astounding. If we go back to 1646, King Charles in those days actually surrendered to a We the People army that was based from the Scots, providing the way, or paving the way, I think, in those days for the end of the House of Windsor, the end of the monarchy. We're going to see that sort of played out again in the coming weeks and months. This will be, I think, the shortest reign of a British monarch that we have ever experienced or really contrived in our lifetimes, and will be the end overall of the British monarchy. You could not be living a more exciting time to be alive. You absolutely could not be more chosen, more called, more blessed, I think more humbled. How amazing that God chose all of us to be here in this moment at this time. How amazing that we've all been empowered with this great awakening, that the Q operation came out under President Trump and has spawned off such incredible research, appreciation, discovery, in many cases rediscovery of the real history of our Earth, our real place in the universe, our real place with one another, our real place before our Creator. I'm smiling so big right now, I might as well be at my own birthday party. It's absolutely incredible to watch. It's incredible to be a part of. Yes, is it scary? Of course. I mean, we've got the situation going on with the U.S. southern border. It's my opinion that particular invasion, if you will, of the southern border is going to achieve some amount of traction before we get in the involvement that we'd like to have, because the United States and the peoples of the United States have really never been exposed in such a fashion. We've always sort of been isolationist, right? We've always sort of been about our own thing. We're over here in our little area, La Cosa Nostra, right? Our little thing here, and the rest of the world has sort of been separate. This is a major lesson, I think, to the peoples of the United States and to we the people everywhere, that we are interconnected, that we are sort of interdependent with one another, and that we the people know no national boundaries. We know no skin colors. We really don't recognize one another for origins. We the people. We are one humanity. We are humankind pressing forward. It's worth highlighting that I think, and we really don't have time to get into it on this file, but there's much more going on with the Title 42 expiration than meets the eye. Title 42 is a civilian emergency power that was sort of put in place for the public health emergency. Excuse me. And as that particular emergency power comes to an end, we return to sort of a standard operational mode. The standard operational mode, of course, being the collapse of the civilian ability to maintain the federal border. And so Chris Miller is on air several times, or excuse me, at least one time, saying that the military can be used for domestic law enforcement, but not until the civilian apparatus of society, the civilian ability to ensure law and order, has broken down. Is this what we mean by that? Is this where we're going with that? It's really hard to say, right? At the same time this is going on, we have the banking system of the entire NATO Western Bloc of nations, primarily based in London and the United States, Great Britain and the United States, coming down in free fall. How these events tie together, how this affects military operations worldwide, I think is anybody's guess. But the fact of the matter remains, we are living the most exciting, incredible, exhilarating, terrifying time that could ever really be here for us, both in the United States and around the world. We, the people, are waking up rapidly. We, the people, are understanding rapidly what's going on with our nations. Just look at Pakistan. Just today, we had Pakistan, the prime minister, the rightful prime minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan, arrested and beaten by his political opposition, by the WEF globalists of that country, and the nation is absolutely on fire now as a result. We have the Pakistani people burning radio stations. We have the Pakistani people destroying news outlets. We have the Pakistani people invading, literally, the homes of senior military officers. We have the Pakistani army sort of preparing for its own internal split. Again, white hat versus black hat, right? People are being forced to choose. For the first time, patriots in all areas and all factions, including the militaries around the world, are being forced to choose. Will they side with we the people? Will they support our constitutional rights, not only in the United States, but around the world? Will they support the law of the land? Will they support a return to natural law? Will they cease and desist with any criminal activity that they've been involved in? Remember, the militaries around the world, especially the United States and NATO nations, are also complicit in war crimes, multiple decades of war crimes going back as far as the 1930s and 40s, certainly that far, maybe even further than that if we get into the history. So who will choose? Who will come to the right side? Where will their allegiance fall? They're being forced into the light. There is nowhere left to hide. There is nowhere left. There is nothing that they can do. We are moving into a new era of light, peace, and love in this world, and those who are against us will be brought to justice. We are witnessing the fall of the cabal in real time. We are witnessing the draining of the swamp worldwide. We are witnessing the destruction of the old guard. We are witnessing the implosion of decades and centuries of power and influence. We are witnessing the end of slavery. We are witnessing the end of totalitarianism. We are witnessing the end of drug trafficking. We are watching the complete dismantling of weapons and smuggling, of human trafficking. We are witnessing the assault and the rescue the assault on and the rescue of hostages all around the world, and the assault on the networks that enabled them to be taken from the world in the ways that they were. We're witnessing the salvation of hundreds of thousands of children. We are witnessing the end of an infrastructure that controlled the world through evil. We are witnessing the defeat of Satan himself. It could not be more exciting. It could not be more exhilarating. It could not be more empowering. And all of us out there, you, your families, your friends, your loved ones, your teachers, your colleagues, your fellow patriots, we will rebuild this world in the way that it was always supposed to be. We will rebuild our earth oriented in the proper direction. We will give God the rightful place. We will have a Christ-like mindset that will help to empower and rejuvenate and reinvigorate all areas of the earth that have been pillaged and pilfered and raped and destroyed for hundreds of years. We are going to create beauty again. We're going to create honor again. We're going to create pleasantry again. We're going to create wealth again. We're going to make our earth great again. That's what it's all about. So for all of you out there, we're going to end on a high note. We're going to go ahead and end here. I feel like if I keep talking, I'm just going to end up giving a speech. It is so amazing to be walking this road with each of you. It's so exciting, even as I recover from my own surgery, to appreciate that the world itself is also going through surgery. The world itself is also being healed. The world itself is being purged of a cancer that very nearly destroyed and killed us all. The world itself is being reoriented. We are changing history. We are finally going to have the correct balance of spiritual power, of spiritual focus, and a clear understanding of who we are as humankind moving forward. It can't get any better than that. So, ladies and gentlemen, take heart today. Enjoy the rest of this month. Q likes to tell us, do you have popcorn ready? I don't really use those sensational terms on this program, but I can honestly say that at this point, I think the show gets a little bit exciting and a little bit rough, but it gets very exhilarating to understand that even in the roughness, there is transformative change. Even in the pinching, there is incredible, wonderment and incredible hope and optimism for the future as we understand what the change is for. All of us can endure if we understand that it's for a good reason. All of us would take a bullet for our children, right? We would understand that the pain, the unpleasantry, the toughness of those sorts of decisions would be okay if there's cause for a much greater good. We are witnessing that cause, and it is for our children and for our posterity that we are here. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a beautiful week. Rest easy. Be sharp. Stay alert. Be prepared. Don't get caught off guard. Make sure you understand what's going on, but always in love and peace and contentment should we act, never in fear. They controlled us through fear, but we are controllable no more. I love all of you. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll be back with you again soon as these things begin to pop off more and more regularly with greater and greater pace and acceleration. Enjoy some sunshine today. Get out and connect with your children. Go hug that spouse that is so pig-headed sometimes. Go and appreciate your family. Connect with nature. Walk around in the grass. Look at the sun. Feel the breeze on your face. You're a child of the living God. There is no need to fear. I'll be back with all of you again soon. This is SGAnon. Thanks. Bye-bye.